8 Flesh and Blood decks for Yu-Gi-Oh players to try out. My name is Alex, welcome to this video. I played Yu-Gi-Oh from my childhood until my mid and late 20s. Though now going in my 30s, I played Flesh and Blood for over 3 years already and making videos about it here on YouTube. That's why I want to combine these two topics together and show Yu-Gi-Oh players out there which Flesh and Blood decks to check out and might be interesting to look into. So let's start with the first one. And that is actually, of course, getting to try out the game at first before buying any cards, right? And there we have in Flesh and Blood so-called first strike decks. They're also free to play IRA welcome decks, but I think the first strike decks are just really well balanced to play against each other, with Terra being a more defensive guardian and Aurora being our aggro deck. And also with trying out Aurora, I want to come to the first classic constructed deck that I think is worth checking out for Yu-Gi-Oh players interested in Flesh and Blood. Not only can you transition from playing Aurora with the first strike deck in Blitz over to Classic Constructed, but also Aurora has a really nice and unique playstyle to it. Also, she is one of the most powerful heroes at the moment, placing at the top 8 of the World Championship 2 times actually, with the second place and then also with Rob Catton's deck list here from the top 8. So quite a powerful hero, also a mixed damage of arcane and physical damage, and including those very nice lightning theme into it. I think though, if Aurora is nothing for you, KO might be interesting. KO is the deck that I play personally at the moment, and I think KO is just super fun and easy to play in the beginning, and there is one card specifically that makes it so interesting. But to begin with, KO is an armory deck that you can just buy for around 30 euros and then try out Classic Constructed that way. But that card that makes KO so interesting in my opinion is that Blood Rush Bellow is one of the few very powerful draw cards in Flesh and Blood. It gives you that Pot of Greed feeling honestly and makes those chains very wide when you can play it out. Also mentioning that the difference between KO and Aurora of course are that KO is really aggressive deck, just like Aurora, but the playstyle is kind of different because Aurora is also utilizing arcane damage and instant cards a lot, and KO is not really doing that. He is rather, a physical damage hero. There is also a deck list that I want to show you here from a recent Battle Hardened in Stockholm, piloted by Yugioh. And he was making it to the 3rd place actually. This deck list of course is a lot more expensive, but this is a starting point that you can look at and see what kind of cards you need in the future and if KO is something for you. Because I think not only is it important to find a deck that is fun to play for yourself, but also a deck that that fits into your budget. And I have a few other videos talking about Yu-Gi-Oh! And Flesh and Blood in comparison, also about the value of those two games, if you want to check those out. There is also another armory deck that I want to mention here that I think is such a fun deck to play in the beginning, but also is a very versatile deck to learn how to play Flesh and Blood. And that is Bolton, the Breaker of Dawn. Bolton is also an armory deck to begin with. It's the cheapest one at the moment, starting at 24.90 actually here on Card Market. And Bolton I think is so interesting because unlike with KO, where you are mostly stuck with 1 or 2 weapon options, Bolton is actually that interesting because you can learn how to play with different weapons. He can utilize the Decimator Great Axe, Raiden Duskbane, the Centauri Saber combo version, or even play Hatchet of Body or Hot Streak in it. So there are a lot of ways that you can try and learn Flesh and Blood with Bolton, and there are a lot of beginner videos out there here on the Fabled Academy if you want to look into Bolton as well. Here mentioning a deck list from the recent Battle Hardened in Stockholm as well. Mika was coming to the 2nd place with Bolton, and he's running those expensive equipments that you need in Flesh and Blood as well, but it is a starting point as well to see like where is the value of Bolton. It's around 400 euros. Spoiler alert. And also I think it's nice because this is one of the few decks that is not running Command and Conquer, which is a very expensive staple in Flesh and Blood. So then I think we are coming to the, for my opinion, very interesting part here in the video. Because so far we talked about decks that are not really building a board state in Flesh and Blood. And that is so unique about Yu-Gi-Oh, right? Those zones that you are playing Yu-Gi-Oh into and those monsters that you are bringing on the board. Actually, there are a few decks in Flesh and Blood that are giving you that vibe of building a board in Yu-Gi-Oh. It's not the same actually, there's no extra deck for example in Flesh and Blood, but I want to show you those decks that are similar to the experience that you're getting in Yu-Gi-Oh. Flesh and Blood is not as fast as Yu-Gi-Oh. Building a board, it's rather a slow and steady pace, but it can get really powerful when your opponent lets you build that board over time and doesn't clear out your monsters on the board. And those monsters, in this case with Draw My Ash Artists, are as, yeah, you can see here with that little dragon, actually, you can play dragons with Draw My. Though I have to be honest here, Draw My Ash Artist is already living legend. And when it comes to Flesh and Blood, there's the living legend system, which makes sure that those powerful decks rotate out over time. And Draw My was a powerful deck that just rotated out in the early to mid of 2024. And so you can only play her in living legend, but it is said by the makers of the game that in the future there is coming a similar hero like Draw My, so we can then play dragons again in Classic Constructed. So this is the hero card for Draw My. There's no deck that you can buy right off the bat, but if you want to look at an example here from the Pro Tour where actually Draw My, piloted by Arthur Trayhead, won the Pro Tour, you can see those dragons being on the board here. And on the other side, Peter Ward, who, spoiler alert, was also a Yu-Gi-Oh player in his early days, playing KO. And so you see there is not really a board state with any allies, as they are called in Flesh and Blood. Rather, he only has tokens, giving him a bonus in his next turn, but Arthur really having, yeah, these small dragons here on the board. Also looking at these dragons, I think for me Yu-Gi-Oh was also about the aesthetics, about the nice cards. And I have to say, those illusionists, Draw My is an illusionist hero, and those other illusionists are similar, not the same, but they are all featuring very, very nice cardboard, like these Marvel dragons that you could play in Draw My. One of those heroes actually available at the moment is Enigma, Ledger of Ancestry, the blue illusionist in Flesh and Blood. She is kind of giving me the Avatar Airbender vibes, right? But that only on the side. Like you can see here, there are also Marvel cards for the Enigma Ledger of Ancestry deck. But more importantly, you are also kind of like in Draw My, building a board state where you are having spectral shield tokens. Here is the hero card for Enigma between, so you can look at her. So you were running a board state with spectral shield tokens and other ward auras around Enigma. Enigma is much more of a defensive deck, but that can slowly bring the opponent down over time. So to say, if we will look at the World Championship here from this year, actually Enigma has won that World Championship with utilizing the Count Your Blessings life gain card. There are also other builds because Count Your Blessings, the blue version, was already banned. The yellow and the red version is still available, but there are still these interesting auras that you're building up on the board that are also kind of giving you those monster vibes. Like Manifestation of Miragai or Rage Spectre, but also I think there is a link between Draw My and Enigma here, right? With Manifestation of Miragai and Miragai also being a dragon. So super interesting for me. Also, there are super nice cards in Enigma available, like the Traverse the Universe here. Though I have to say, I personally wouldn't play Enigma. I would prefer Droma if she would really be available. But luckily, we have a third illusionist to choose as, yeah, one of those board building heroes. And Prism Awakener of Souls specifically also, here is her hero card between, so you can read her effect in more detail, evolves around bringing out allies that are angels. So if we are looking at those archangels as they are called, there are multiple archangels available for Prism to utilize on. And I have to say, also the Marvel versions of those are looking really nice. So if you are all about those shiny cards, Illusionists are really for you if you are coming from Yu-Gi-Oh! I have to say though, there are also these heralds that you need to play in Prism. And so I have to say, Prism is a really, it's one of those more complicated classes in general with Illusionist. And I think Prism in general, talking about her, it is a deck that you need to take a lot of time to learn, also with those different matchups. I think also looking at the card pool, there are cards called Herald of Erudition and Soraya Archangel of Erudition, and those are basically also granting you that nice draw effects. That is really rare in Flesh and Blood between. There were a lot of draw cards, but they were banned during the year, like all of those tomes, like the Tome of Aetherwind or the Tome of Fiendal, which was also a card that you wanted to play in Prism. I showed you the Marvels here already. Here is a decklist example from this year's Calling in Lyon. Sammy Wax, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, got third place here. And basically a pretty interesting list, I have to say. He is running, spoiler though, 2 Fables here actually, which are the rarest cards from those booster boxes, the Great Library of Solana and also the Light of Soul. But definitely, in my opinion, a deck list or a deck in general that Yu-Gi-Oh! Players can look into. Also, what I like about Prism is that you have the option of playing Prism Sculptor of Arclight in the Living Legend format. So you both have the option of playing her Prism Awakener of Soul in Classic Constructed and then her Living Legend version, which plays a little bit more different without those archangels. Also Arclight Sentinel, I need to mention it here, is one of those. It is one of those more game-breaking cards in Flesh and Blood, honestly, and you can play that card in the Prism decks. Also, I already mentioned Herald of Erudition, a very interesting card to play. And then also, I think, coming to those legendary equipments here, just mentioning it to you, if you're a Flesh and Blood player interested, if you're a Yu-Gi-Oh! Player interested in Flesh and Blood, definitely some of those decks, and Prism is one of those, you can play it without those legendary cards, but I think really Phantasmal Footsteps is a card that you want to get over time if you're interested in those decks. Those Fables, though, I think they are really optional, but it's a recurring theme with Prism that at least a Great Library of Solana, nearly all of those topping deck lists play that Fable. Then coming to the next deck that you want to check out is Zen Tamer of Purpose, another aggro deck that we have in Flesh and Blood, but a lot different one than Aurora and Yugioh, utilizing those ninja powers to bring out different attacks, because he has not only those physical attacks that Yugioh-like effects have, but also he's playing with combos like 100 Winds or with Spinning Wheel Kick. And then to add on to that, also he is evolving around cards that interact with Crouching Tigers. I have to say, the Crouching Tiger theme is one of my all-time favorite in Flesh and Blood, and I think it is one of the most interesting decks to play. It is also a really diverse one, because honestly, Zen was getting a few bans this year because he was too powerful, but still he's very powerful and he will stick around for a few more months to play out. But in general, I think he's one of the more powerful decks that we are looking at in this video. Coming to Kano, Drakai of Aether. And I think this is one of the... I think even this is the last deck we are looking at, right? Yeah, this is the last deck I want to show you here. And I have to say, always when I think about this, I have to say Kano is, when it comes to Flesh and Blood, I think the most similar deck that it can be to a Yu-Gi-Oh deck, because we are playing mostly on instant speed, actually 100% of the time in some cases. And Kano is also one of those decks that can blow up your opponent in a single turn. You need a little bit of time to set that turn up in Flesh and Blood. Rarely you get to blow up your opponent with Kano in the first turn, but it can get, yeah, very exciting to learn that deck. It's a lot more the solitaire vibe in Flesh and Blood when you're coming from Yu-Gi-Oh! That you are building a combo, that you are searching for pieces, that you are planning out, not that you are just doing it on the first turn. And one of those cards that you really need for Kano is Storm Striders. There's nowhere around it really when you want to play Kano, but as you can see, it's around 60 to 70 euros here, and it's one of the most powerful cards actually in Flesh and Blood. Also, I have to say, some of those cards played in Kano were banned during the year 2, but Kano is a hero that was out until sorry guys, I'm from Germany, sometimes I mix it up. He was being released in 2020, so he was legal for 4 years already, and it seems like he will be legal for the next year for sure, and maybe even longer. So definitely a deck to look into. Like I said, those tomes, the Tome of Yendal, the Tome of Aetherwind, and yeah, he quite got some bans like this one, the Tome of Yendal. But nonetheless, in the battle-hardened Sydney, Fahad Rahman was playing him after the bans. As you can see, there are no tomes in here. But he was playing Open the Floodgates, which is kind of interesting because it draws 2 cards as well. So he kind of got a replacement in Classic constructed for those tomes. But also, this deck list, keep in mind, is playing Will of Arcana, which is also fabled, and then also Eye of Ophidia, which is kind of a staple in Kano, but you can play him without the Eye of Ophidia, definitely. It is such important to know about these fables, in my opinion, when getting into Flesh and Blood. Also, Yendal Spring Tunic, you need that one for Kano. So Kano is also pricey deck, but in general, I think Flesh and Blood is just a more pricey TCG. Coming to Living Legend, though, and I think there's a theme throughout this video, right? Kano is super powerful in Living Legend. Peter Budensik, one of the Kano masters in Flesh and Blood, won the Battle Hardened in Osaka, the Living Legend Battle Hardened in Osaka, with Kano utilizing all of the Open the Floodgate cards, as well as the tomes, the Tome of Fiendal and the Tome of Aetherwind here is it too. It was such a mess. Afterwards, Open the Floodgates was limited, but I think it's super interesting, and I would love to hear the opinion of many Yu-Gi-Oh players touching on Kano and any of the other decks that I mentioned here in the video. I also think there are Yu-Gi-Oh players already out there in the Flesh and Blood community, so you can find peers to talk about the similarities. Also, I have made some videos already about that topic, and I want to continue doing so. And yeah, I hope this video helped you, and that this may be your first step on trying out Flesh and Blood as a Yu-Gi-Oh player. Definitely, thank you so much for tuning in this video, and now check out one of the next videos on the Fabled Academy.